Guys, so this is your second lecture this week. This is the third time I've recorded this because my coughing has been terrible. The first time the audio didn't come through. Um, so excuse me if I go really quick on this. I'm just tired of this lecture. Gosh, getting sick is just not great. So we're going to talk about your individual responsibility and how you react to media when it comes to being objective and your personal biases. So let's take a look. One of the first things that you need to learn about is what's called selective exposure. Basically, when you're consuming media, you are usually psychologically, without thinking about it, choosing to view media that aligns with what you believe, and you avoid media that doesn't align with it. So think about when you're subscribing, liking, following, you're doing it for things that you like, that you agree with, that you enjoy, and you tend to start unfollowing people if you don't like things that they're posting. And although that may be great for your mental health, I think we've all done a lot of that in the last couple of years with just everything going on. Sometimes it can put you into what's called an echo chamber. And we talked a little bit about that in the first lecture about fake news, but selective exposure is just basically only looking at media that you agree with. And it doesn't have to just be political or newsworthy. It can be, just about pop culture too. Say you only like sci-fi or you only like horror and nothing else matters. And so don't think of it so much about news. It can be about anything media related. Um, TikTok is really good about selective exposure because it puts you into a silo of things that are just for you. The For You page is highly um, great at getting that algorithm correct. Um, Another thing that goes along with selective exposure is cognitive dissonance. And this is a media effects theory that basically says when you are mentally um, uncomfortable with the idea that there are two or more contradictory beliefs that you hold. So basically, you can have one idea that you believe in, and another one comes in and it makes you second guess it. And you're like, okay, but like, what do you mean? Well, let me give you an example. For most of you, you know that I absolutely love Disney. Disneyland is my favorite place in the world. It's where I went on my honeymoon. It's where I did my dissertation projects. It's my favorite place. I would live there if I absolutely could. But even though I love the magic and I love the pixie dust and all of that, it's not the greatest all the time, right? Think about they are continually hiking prices um, to make it out of reach for people to go. It's so expensive that, an average family can't afford to go there and enjoy it. And even when they get there, they have to pay extra to get to certain rides. They have to pay extras to see characters now, the merchandise, the food. It's just getting to be ridiculous. They're also saying that, with the CEO making a six-figure salary, he's one of the highest paid people in the world. But then like the people that bring the magic at the parks make hardly nothing. And that was very evident when they shut down during COVID and these people didn't have hardly any wages to live off of. And then, of course, we all know that Disney has a past, and sometimes that past isn't good. And so they say they're going to change things. They say they're going to try and, do better going forward. But how fast are they making those changes? And are they actually making them for the better? So here I have this idea that I love Disney. I love everything, about the magic of it. But in reality, they have some things that maybe I don't always agree with. And so that cognitive dissonance is going in my head. And what can you do with that? Well, there's a few things. I could change my belief and just say, I'm not gonna believe in Disney anymore. I'm not gonna support them. Or I could change my behavior and say, well, I still like Disney, but maybe I'm not going to go to the parks. Maybe I'm not going to support them in that way. I can believe in one thing, but not the other. There's always adding a thought. And you say, well, Disney does do these things. And I'm going to put that in my mind and I'm going to keep that there. And I'm just adding it to, what I already believe in. And then there's trivializing the inconsistency where I can say, everything's going up. So of course the price of the tickets are going to go up, or everyone isn't getting paid what they need to because everything's going up. And really, I mean, this was a staple ride, and I don't think it's racist. Those kinds of things. I can just trivialize it and say that they don't exist. When it comes to cognitive dissonance, it's enhanced by a few different things: your choice, your personal thoughts, your highly valued beliefs, and your dissonant strengths. So basically, you have a choice based on your thoughts and your morals, and then the weight that you give it. So if you think about whether I like Disney or not, does going to the parks because it makes me happy outweigh the fact that maybe they're not always a great company? And that's something I have to deal with my own morals and my own cognitive dissonance. Now, you'll all have your own version of this on several different things. It's not just one thing that, can cause this, but this is something you need to be aware of, that when you have selective exposure, when you are introduced an opposite view or something that goes against what you believe, it can cause cognitive dissonance, and you're going to have to decide what your personal choices are. And I hope that as a media professional, you will decide that this is okay, and that you're going to look at both sides objectively. A lot of times we think about cognitive dissonance when we think about voting and politics, because it's very polarized, right? And there's never going to be one ideal candidate that holds every belief that you do. If there is, I would like to meet them. So with cognitive dissonance and voting and political views, you have to kind of weigh it, right? Does this moral fact and opinion outweigh the ones that maybe they don't support as much? And so that's another way to think of, not just Disney, but politics or news or however you want to look at it. There's also a thing called confirmation bias. So when you take selective exposure, cognitive dissonance, there's also confirmation bias. And basically, it's that you interpret information in a way that aligns with your existing beliefs. So for instance, people of opposing views can find support for their views in the same body of evidence from somebody else. So to say that I say horror is a terrible genre and I should, no one should ever watch it. And somebody's like, well, I think that you should read this article about how horror actually gets your adrenaline rushing. And it's good for you, like psychologically, because it makes you face your fears. And I read through it and I'm like, yes, I see. Say it says fears. And how the adrenaline that could cause a heart attack, or it could cause nightmares for people. And so I find evidence in this opposing view that supports my own. And of course, that's a very broad, spectrum of like a horror genre versus like if you talked about COVID or abortions or whatever. And so with confirmation bias, there's always going to be this, oh, but I can see my view in that. You just, you're still wrong. So I want to show you this video that kind of explains this as well.
Two guys are sitting together in a bar in the remote Alaskan wilderness, arguing about the existence of God. While they're old friends, they have very different ideas on God. One is a priest, and the other is an atheist. The atheist says, "Look, it's not like I haven't given God a chance. I've even tried the prayer thing. It didn't work." The priest asks with some incredulity, "Did you really pray? When did this happen?" "Just last month," replies the atheist. I got caught away from the camp in a terrible blizzard. I was totally lost and I couldn't see a thing. It was 20 degrees below zero, and so I prayed. I fell to my knees in the snow and cried out, "Oh God, if there is a God, I'm lost in this blizzard, and I'm going to die if you don't help me." The priest looks at the atheist puzzled and says, "Well, then you must believe in God now. After all, here you are, alive." The atheist rolls his eyes and replies, No, that's not how it happened. A couple of Eskimos came wandering by and showed me the way back to the camp." So, where do such different perspectives come from? Confirmation bias is a tendency to look for, interpret, and recall information in ways that affirm our preconception. Whenever we encounter objective facts on an issue, we look at them through the lens of our own beliefs. As a result, we see and overrate where the two intercept. The bias is strongest for emotionally charged issues or when we search for desired outcomes. Wrapped inside popular narratives, cultural beliefs, and family values, a confirmation bias often gets passed on for generations. The priest learned from his ancestors that God is behind everything. The atheist was raised within a family that believed only in scientific knowledge. When we are confronted with unfamiliar or new situations, a bias helps us to draw fast conclusions. If every encounter with a stranger would require us to think of all sorts of possible outcomes, we would not come to any conclusions. Economically speaking, it would be too costly. To survive in a dangerous world, we learn to operate like storytelling, pattern-seeking animals, each one of us thinking that our story in our head is the right one. Today, we can afford to slow down and think more deeply about certain issues. When we do this, we can become aware of our own biases. We begin to realize that things are often more complicated than we thought.
So, what does it matter? What does it matter if I have this opinion, whether it's confirmation bias, whether it's from selective exposure, or it's whether because I weighed my cognitive dissonance and won one out? Think about it this way. The priest said, "Oh, you prayed, that's why you were saved." And the atheist said, "Well, no, I was saved by the Eskimos." And he goes, and the priest said, "Well, but did you really pray?" He was putting that confirmation bias in there, right? Like, but did you really pray? Or so we constantly naturally want to say that what we believe in is true and question those that say what they think, if it's opposite of us, is wrong. And even though that's natural, as media consumers, as media professionals, we have to see both sides of these things. And I know you'll probably get tired of us, saying that, but this is how you grow and you become not only a better person, but a better media professional, because you can see both sides of an argument. Now, one of the things that you'll see along with selective exposure and confirmation bias is ideological polarization. And basically, the idea of ideological polarization is that it's the divergence of political attitudes in the mass public to the ideological extreme. And so you say you have the political spectrum here. You have the Democrats on one side, you have the Republicans on the other. But there is a diversity and an equal distribution of people who believe those ideas. When you come online, especially, you have this thing called ideological polarization, and it goes from being equally dispersed to this. And so there's less diversity there. People are very polarized. They have very selective views, and they don't want to see what the other side sees. And so, when you think about selective bias, when you think about confirmation or selective exposure and confirmation bias, this plays into it just with the political um, highlight. Basically, when people go online, there is no repercussions for what they say. They don't care about what the information they're sharing is because they're usually in an echo chamber. And so they just start battling over their ideas. Um, and more they battle, the more affirmed they get in their view because of that echo chamber, and the less they want to talk to other people. So I liked this quote. It said, people tend to give up battling over ideas, and a vote becomes more of an affirmation of a group than an expression of a civic opinion. So you're not just voting as a civic duty to express what you think our government should do, but rather as an affirmation to your group because Republicans believe in this, or Democrats believe this, or Libertarians believe this. I'm going to vote that way. Ideological polarization really diversifies a lot of things. It makes opinions and arguments hard because people are only going to see one side. The more people become polarized, the more extreme they are in their beliefs and their thinking. And they start losing any inclination to proactively discuss ideas with others. So you think about the hostile media that we talked about in the fake news lecture, where people are like, I um, think that the media is out to get me because they are saying these things that go against everything I believe in. And this is where ideological polarization comes in, because everything that you believe in is in an echo chamber online. And this is where you have to be careful about algorithms, about what you're liking and subscribing to. It's okay that you like these things, that you believe in them, but you have to be able to um, accept and see other sides. Whether you truly accept them in the end or not, that's okay, but you're still seeing them. You're still able to have an open discussion. And so this was Pew Research done in 2019, and it basically said that most Americans believe that political debates in the US have become less respectful. They are not fact-based, and they're just basically about entertainment and not about substantive news. Um, so a lot of that becomes a part of this idea of online and in our media, where people are becoming politically polarized, where they are selecting the exposure that they have to certain ideas and certain news outlets, certain media, and they're really not kicking in that cognitive dissonance where they're, challenging what they believe in. So we have one more lecture this week that I'll put up, and that's going to tell you how to kind of go through and look at facts for fake news.